عمان هي الإنسان والأفق الحضاري والعراقة الضاجة في روح التاريخ، وهي الحاضر الواثق والزاخر والمستقبل الطموح الذاهب نحو أعالي مدارات الازدهار والنماء. ومن أجل هذه الأرض إنساناً وتاريخاً وحضارة تأسس وانطلق مشروع
بيت الزبير. هو إجابة لسؤال: كيف يمكن أن نرد الجميل لمجتمعنا ولبلدنا، وأن نقدم صورة معبرة للآخر عن تاريخنا ومقوماتنا الحضارية ومشهدنا الثقافي في الماضي والحاضر والمستقبل.
التراث والفنون والثقافة ثلاثية تشكل أضلاع المثلث الذي تموضعت فيه مشاريع بيت الزبير. فجاءت رؤية المؤسسة كما أرادها المؤسس معالي محمد بن الزبير لتنص على الريادة في قطاعات التراث والثقافة والفنون.
انطلق بيت الزبير عام 1998 بإنشاء بيت الباغ، بالإضافة إلى الحديقة والتي تحتوي على عدد من الملامح التقليدية العمانية. وفي عام 1999 تم إنشاء بيت الدلالي. في عام 2008 تم إنشاء بيت العود، وهو عبارة عن احتفال بمرور 10 سنوات من إنشاء المتحف. في عام 2011 افتتح بيت النهضة. يضم بيت الزبير العديد من المقتنيات المميزة، وهي موزعة على 4 مباني في مجمع بيت الزبير. ومعظم هذه المقتنيات موزعة في بيت الباغ، والذي يحتوي على 12 قاعة عرض. وبيت الباغ هو بيت العائلة الأصلي، بناها الشيخ الزبير بن علي عام 1914 كمسكن للعائلة، وأيضاً كان ملتقى للنخب من المجتمع.
بيت الزبير هو بيت خبرة في مجال الفنون التشكيلية، فمنذ أمد بعيد والبيت يحتضن معارض دائمة ومؤقتة، ويقيم المناشط التي تساند الجهود الرامية للتأسيس لوعي فني نقدي كالندوات والبحوث والدراسات والملتقيات المحلية والدولية.
يمثل قطاع الفنون ركيزة مهمة ضمن ركائز مؤسسة بيت الزبير. فمنذ الوهلة الأولى لإنشاء بيت الزبير تم تخصيص عدد من القاعات التي تم تهيئتها لاحتضان الفنون التشكيلية بكافة أنواعها، سواء كانت المنحوتات أو اللوحات الفنية إلى جانب أعمال التصوير الضوئي. وفي إطار حرص بيت الزبير على توثيق الجوانب الفنية، قمنا بإصدار عدد من الكتب المتخصصة في مجال الفنون التشكيلية، كما قمنا بإصدار جائزة بيت الزبير للفنون، حيث حصل في النسخة الأولى لهذه الجائزة الفنان القدير أنور سونيا.
تعد المهرجانات الثقافية وأيام بيت الزبير من أكبر الفعاليات التي تنظم في مؤسسة بيت الزبير من حيث استقطابها لأعداد كبيرة من الجماهير. ومن أهم هذه المهرجانات والفعاليات مهرجان بيت الزبير للموسيقى الصوفية، ومهرجان المسرح الدائري، وأيام بيت الزبير للسرد، وأيام بيت الزبير للترجمة، وأيام بيت الزبير للفنون، بالإضافة إلى ملتقى بيت الزبير الفلسفي وملتقى الشباب. المفصل التنفيذي المهم في أحداث وأنشطة مؤسسة بيت الزبير كان تأسيس المختبرات الثقافية. هذه المختبرات أسهمت في خلق مناخ تفاعلي، وأيضاً ساهمت في الذهاب إلى شرائح مختلفة من المجتمع. هذه الأطياف كلها أسهمت في أن تمتد أنشطة مؤسسة بيت الزبير وتحقق اللامركزية بالذهاب إلى خارج موقع بيت الزبير وكذلك خارج مسقط.
يأتي رد الجميل للأوطان على هيئة أشكال متعددة، ولهذا أراد والدنا معالي محمد الزبير أن يرد جميل وفضل الوطن عليه بإنشاء ورعاية مؤسسة ثقافية ذات رؤية مستدامة تخدم عمان وإنسانها وقيمها وتطلعاتها ومستقبلها.
نحن نلمس تجليات هذه الرؤية في توجيه معاليه حفظه الله الدائم لنا بالعناية بحزمة من الضوابط والموجهات التي تعمل كإطار معنوي وكإحداثيات قيمية تتحرك من خلالها منظومة العمل. أتحدث هنا عن قيم الشراكة، التعاون، الاستدامة، هناك توجيه دائم من معاليه بأن نعنى بالمشاريع والبرامج التي تترك أثراً مستداماً. وكذلك التناغم مع منظومة العمل الثقافي الوطني.
كما عملت المؤسسة على تجسير التواصل بين مختلف أشكال الخطاب الثقافي ومداولاته وفاعليه محلياً ودولياً. وسوف تواصل المؤسسة رحلتها في خدمة التراث والثقافة والفنون لإكمال مسيرة النجاحات والإضافات النوعية التي أصبحت علامات فارقة في تاريخ الفعل الثقافي محلياً ودولياً.
بيت الزبير الآن أصبح لديه تراكم خبرات كبير في مجال العمل الثقافي، نشاطات كثيرة ومتنوعة في خدمة الثقافة العمانية والمجتمع العماني، وكذلك جميع المقيمين والسائحين من مختلف الأعمار. كل هذه الخبرات جعلتنا ندرك أن التواصل الثقافي هو السبيل إلى التعاون، السبيل إلى التفاهم والتعايش المشترك على مستوى العالم.
أهم برامج المعهد تعليم اللغات ومجالات الثقافة، إيماناً منا بدوره المهم في بناء جسور التواصل والترابط بين شعوب العالم، وتعزيز التفاهم بين مختلف الثقافات. فاللغة وعاء الثقافة، والثقافة ذاكرة الشعوب. نحن نقدم لغتنا وثقافتنا إلى الآخر، نرسخ هويتنا العمانية في الداخل والخارج، وكذلك نقدم اللغات الأجنبية وثقافاتها للمجتمع العماني، مواطنين ومقيمين. وكل هذا يعبر عنه شعارنا سعياً للتعايش العالمي.
لتحقيق أهدافنا على أكمل وجه وبأعلى جودة، لقد قمنا بعقد العديد من الشراكات المحلية والدولية، وحالياً نسعى للقيام بالمزيد منها، وذلك من خلال فتح قنوات التواصل والتعاون مع العديد من المؤسسات الاعتماد والتعليم في مختلف البلدان، منها إيطاليا، روسيا، الصين، كوريا، إسبانيا، المغرب، تونس ومصر. ولقد أنجزنا اتفاقاً تاماً وشاملاً مع مؤسسة دانتي أليغيري للغة والثقافة الإيطالية لتعليم اللغة الإيطالية في معهد بيت الزبير.
الإنسان يتكون عن طريق تنمية عقله وتنمية روحه، والفنون تسهم في تنمية الروح وبناء الذوق الجميل والتذوق الجمالي للأشياء. لذلك يقدم المعهد دروساً وبرامج في الموسيقى وفي الرسم وفي غيرها من الفنون التي تسهم في بناء هذه الذائقة الطيبة لمختلف الأعمار. نقدم هذه البرامج سواء أكان بالحضور الشخصي أم عبر الإنترنت، وما تتيحه لنا هذه التقنية خاصة بعد أزمة وجائحة كورونا من سبل تعلم عن بعد.
نحن ننطلق من رؤية واضحة بتحقيق الريادة في تقديم خدمات التعليم والتدريب والتعلم المستمر. ومؤسسة بيت الزبير مؤسسة تمتلك مقومات فريدة، كما أنها تمتلك المعرفة والخبرة التي تستقطب الكفاءات المحلية وكذلك أيضاً الكفاءات الدولية من خلال عقد الشراكات مع المؤسسات التعليمية الكبرى حول العالم من أجل تحقيق رؤية المعهد المتسقة مع رؤية عمان 2040. من أجل ذلك نحن نسعى إلى تحقيق مجموعة من الأهداف تأتي في أولويتها ترسيخ هويتنا العمانية ونشر لغتنا العربية والثقافة العمانية والعربية والإسلامية، وكذلك تمكين الكفاءات العمانية المحلية من خلال مجموعة من الدبلومات المنوعة، وكذلك أيضاً إتاحة نشر اللغات والثقافات الأجنبية من أجل تحقيق التعايش والتفاهم العالمي. كل ذلك لا يمكن أن يتحقق بدون الجودة والإتقان والأصالة المتسقة كذلك مع قيم المؤسسة المتمثلة في الشراكة والمسؤولية والاحترام وخدمة المجتمع.
Welcome where innovation meets excellence in the heart of Oman. For over a decade, we've been at the forefront of the oil industry, continuously pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Our journey began in 2014, and since then we've achieved remarkable milestones. From a humble start of 3,000 barrels per day, we've soared to an impressive 17,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day in 2024. We harness the power of cutting-edge technology and an integrated drilling approach to maximize efficiency at every stage. The advanced rigs and technical capabilities set us apart in the industry. We're not just about technology, we're about people. Our dedicated training center prepares Omani specialists, ensuring our workforce is equipped for both short and long-term success. Our commitment to sustainability and environmental stewardship is unwavering. We've implemented innovative water management systems and reduced carbon emissions practices to protect our planet. We're looking to an even brighter future as we celebrate our achievements. With strategic investment and exploration, we aim to reach 30,000 barrels per day and beyond. Join us on this incredible journey, fueling life with innovation and integrity.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أصحاب السمو والمعالي، أصحاب السعادة، أيها الضيوف الأفاضل، يسعدني أن أرحب بكم في الجلسة الافتتاحية لمهرجان بيت الزبير للموسيقى الصوفية في دورته الثالثة. هذا المهرجان الفريد الذي يجمعنا تحت سماء واحدة ونغم واحد ونبض واحد. مهرجان بيت الزبير للموسيقى الصوفية هو احتفال بروحنا، بتراثنا، وبجمال الموسيقى التي تجسر المسافات وتوحد القلوب. نلتقي اليوم وفي الأيام المقبلة لنستمع إلى أنغام صوفية تأخذنا في رحلات روحانية، رحلات نستكشف فيها أعماق أنفسنا وعلاقتنا بالكون. إن الموسيقى الصوفية ليست مجرد أصوات، بل هي لغة سامية تتخطى الحواجز اللغوية والثقافية، تحمل في طياتها رسائل سامية عن الحب والسلام والتسامح. يسعدني في هذه الليلة الأولى بشكل خاص أن أرحب بضيفنا المميز البروفيسور عثمان كان. البروفيسور كان هو أستاذ الدراسات الأفريقية والأمريكية بجامعة هارفرد، وأستاذ فخري الأمير الوليد بن طلال للدين والمجتمع الإسلامي. حصل البروفيسور كان على درجات البكالوريوس من المعهد الوطني للغات والحضارات الشرقية في باريس، ودبلوم الدراسات المعمقة من المعهد نفسه، ودرجة الماجستير والدكتوراه من معهد الدراسات السياسية في باريس. لديه العديد من الدراسات والإصدارات، منها لسبيل المثال إلى الحصر الدراسات الإسلامية في أفريقيا، اتجاهات جديدة وسياقات عالمية، وما وراء تمبكتو، تاريخ للمغرب الإسلامي في غرب أفريقيا، والعديد من البحوث الأخرى. سيشاركنا البروفيسور كان اليوم بأفكاره النيرة حول العلاقات الفكرية والروحية بين أفريقيا السوداء والعالم العربي. إن هذه العلاقة التاريخية العميقة تشكل جزءاً هاماً من هويتنا، ومحاضرة البروفيسور اليوم ستسلط الضوء على جوانب مهمة من هذا التراث المشترك. أود أن أنوه بأنه تتوفر ترجمة فورية إلى اللغة العربية، وكل ما عليكم استلام السماعات من الطاولة في خلف القاعة. يسعدني الآن دعوة البروفيسور لإلقاء ورقته، فليتفضل المشكورة. شكراً.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على مولانا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، ورضي الله تعالى عن أصحابه ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. First, I would like to thank the Beit Zubair Foundation for honoring me with the invitation to visit Oman and to give this lecture. It's a very great honor for me, and I would like to thank everybody for attending. Tonight, I would like to share some thoughts about the intellectual and spiritual relations between Sudanic Africa and the Arab world, and by Sudanic Africa, I mean Sub-Saharan Africa, a region which medieval Arab geographers named Bilad al-Sudan. I will argue that Sudani Muslims have participated in local and translocal Islamic intellectual and spiritual networks of exchange as students and teachers for centuries throughout the Dar al-Islam. Their participation, however, has been largely obscured in Islamic studies in the Western Academy due to the academic division of labor there, which separates Sub-Saharan Africa from the Middle East and North African region. The organization of Islamic studies in the Western Academy is informed by area studies. The premise of area studies is that for the purpose of academic inquiry, the world can be divided into main regions on the basis of common culture. Some of these regions are North America, Latin America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Asia, East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Middle East and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, etc. While this particular division of labor enables scholars to acquire a deep expertise in a specific geographic area, it can also obscure the connections between areas that might have a lot in common. In the Western Academy, departments and centers of African studies focus on Sub-Saharan Africa and typically exclude North Africa. The reverse is also true. Institutes and departments of Middle Eastern studies center their programming on North Africa and some parts of Western Asia, and the roots of this particular division of labor in the study of Africa, one could argue, lie in the racial bias of some European Enlightenment thinkers, such as the famous German philosopher, the philosopher Hegel, who felt the need to separate a black and uncivilized Africa from one that contributed to and shared some of Europe's Mediterranean heritage. Let me cite Hegel for the record, who said in his Lessons on the Philosophy of History, delivered in the early 19th century, the following: at this point, we leave Africa, not to mention it again, for it's no historical part of the world. It has no movement or development to exhibit. Historical movements in it, in the north part, belong to the Asiatic and European world. Carthage displayed there an important transitionary phase of civilization because it's a Phoenician colony. It belongs to Asia. Egypt will be considered in reference to the passage of the human mind from its eastern to its western phase, but it doesn't belong to the African spirit. What we properly understand by Africa is the historical, undeveloped spirit still involved in the conditions of mere nature, which had to be presented here only as on the threshold of world history, end of quote. Such a division, North Africa versus Sub-Saharan Africa, and its underlying assumptions overlook the fact that for centuries, the Islamic faith, the Arabic language, the Madhab Maliki, affiliation to Sufi Turuq, and many other ties cemented relations between large populations of the Maghrib, the Sahara, and West Africa. The same is true for the East African coast and the Arabian Peninsula. Moreover, many Sudani Muslims imagine and understand their communities in ways that directly contradict this largely Western division in Islamic studies. If, for the purpose of academic study, it was justified to divide the African continent on the basis of common culture, the dividing line should not be the Sahara or the changing of the skin color, but the equator. As shown in the map, the expansion of Islam in Africa stops at the equator. And the northern half of the continent below the equator is overwhelmingly Muslims and Sunni. This means more specifically that most countries of sub-Saharan Africa lying partially above the equator, such as Senegal, Mali, Guinea, Chad, Nigeria, to the Sudan, are at least 90% Muslims. Therefore, people like the Wolof, the Fulani, the Hausa, the Mandés, the Zerma living in such countries have had much more in common for centuries up until now in terms of language, history, culture, philosophy, religion with the Arabs and the Berbers than with other black people such as the Zulu or Xhosa of South Africa. Likewise, Muslims in the East African coast have maintained economic, intellectual, and spiritual relations with their brethren of the Arabian Peninsula for centuries. Neither the Sahara nor the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, not even the Atlantic, as I will comment later, have been obstacles to sustain translocal interactions between Muslims. Yet, based on the assumption that Sudanic Africa was isolated from the rest of the Muslim world by desert, sea, or ocean, it was assumed that its Islamization was superficial. This is the myth of black Islam, which is assumed to be different from Arab Islam. According to such a myth, the true religious soul of black people is paganism or the worship of idols. Thus, in the Western Academy, the study of religion in Sudanic Africa had remained for a long time the preserve of anthropologists who specialize in indigenous religions. In contrast, Islamicists with a sound knowledge of Arabic devoted their attention to document the intellectual history of the Middle East and North Africa in most of the 20th century, in total neglect of the contribution of Sudanic Africa. To give you just an illustration, Karl Brockelmann, the foremost Orientalist of his generation, who was a professor at the University in Breslau, Berlin, and Königsberg in Germany, is best known for his multi-volume work, Geschichte der arabischen Literatur, or History of the Arabic Written Tradition, which was first published in 1898 to 1902. This encyclopedia included all writers in Arabic to 1937 and remains the fundamental reference volume for all Arabic literature in the West. It devoted only 4 pages to scholars from sub-Saharan Africa, as if they have made no serious contribution to Arabic literature. In the same vein, John Spencer Trumingham, the British missionary, produced several works on Islam in Africa that tended to establish that the Islamization of sub-Saharan Africa was superficial. Till the end of the 20th century, the myth of a superficial sub-Saharan African Islam was the dominant paradigm in African Islamic studies. As a result, the contribution of Muslim scholars of Sudanic Africa were not recognized in Islamic studies in the Western Academy. From the early 21st century, a paradigm shift was provoked by the arrival of a new generation of African and Western scholars who challenged the notion that Islamization of Sudanic Africa was superficial. On the one hand, this new generation documented a solid Islamic textual tradition in Sudanic Africa. On the other hand, by emphasizing interactions across the desert and oceans, they proved that Sudanic African Muslims participated in a broader discursive tradition that connected scholars from different parts of the Muslim world. To corroborate my argument, I will first discuss trans-Saharan intellectual and spiritual relations. Subsequently, I will comment on the relations between East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Then I will share 2 poems from a theologian, Sufi leader, author, and poet from West Africa, a scholar who received his entire training in his native Senegal and yet has made an immense contribution to Arabic and Islamic studies. I will conclude that non-Arabs, including scholars from sub-Saharan Africa, have made a great contribution to the development of Arabic from the beginning of the Islamic era, and that the Arabic language has been a glue holding Muslims from different parts of the world together. Now, relation between North Africa and West Africa. The Saharan desert has been assumed in popular representation as well as in academia as an obstacle to interactions between North Africa and Sudanic Africa. With a landmass of 9 million square kilometers, the Sahara is one of the largest deserts on Earth. It extends 5,500 kilometers across the breadth of Africa, from the North Atlantic to the Red Sea, and nearly 2,000 kilometers. Today, the Sahara is one of the most arid areas on Earth. 20,000 before Christ, it has been as arid as it is today, and there has been drier periods before that. But between 9,000 and 3,000 before Christ, the Sahara was densely populated, and Neolithic inhabitants have left traces of their activities and civilizations. There is evidence that in the southern Sahara, a wide variety of tropical cereals such as millet and sorghum were domesticated. By the beginning of the Islamic era, the desertification notwithstanding, the domestication of the camel enabled long-distance communication in the Sahara. Therefore, North African and Saharan Arabs and Berbers and Sub-Saharan Black were already in contact through trade. Later, as Islam made inroads south of the Sahara, new spiritual and intellectual networks solidified these ties. Several lucrative trade routes linked main centers of the Maghreb with Sudanic Africa, which was renowned for its gold. The most impressive testimony of the legendary gold of West Africa is the stay of the Mali Emperor Mansa Musa in Egypt in 1324. He arrived in Cairo during the rule of Mamluk ruler Al-Nasir bin Qala'un on his way to Mecca, and distributed so much gold that his passage was recorded in great detail in Arab and even European sources. Indeed, a picture of Mansa Musa is featured in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, drawn by Abraham Cresques, one of the first maps providing serious information about Africa. Today, Mali is one of the poorest countries on earth, but the predecessor empire whose name it adopted was a world supply of gold. In the 16th century, an estimated 2/3 of the world's gold came from West Africa. I hasten to add that historians are unsure of exactly how much gold was exported from sub-Saharan Africa to the north. According to the best estimates, it was slightly above 1 ton a year between the 9th and the 15th century. But although this may look insignificant compared to the amount of gold produced by modern extracting technology, medieval mining techniques limited the quantity of gold that could be obtained anywhere in the world, and limited geographical knowledge kept the gold of the New World outside global market. As early as the 10th century, West African gold was minted into coins in the cities of the Maghreb and Fatimid Tunisia before circulating eastwards through the Middle East and beyond, and providing currency for the Silk Road of Central Asia and spice routes in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, Sudanic Africa was fully integrated in the global political economy, but also in the broader Dar al-Islam during the Middle Age. Large and small caravans traveled across the Sahara to convey goods that include gold, salt, iron, copper, leather, paper, horse, but last but not least, slaves. There is a stereotype that enslavement has been the normal and most important pattern of relations between Arabs and blacks. It is true that the so-called Oriental slave trade lasted well over a millennium, witnessing the deportation of millions of black people to North Africa and Asia. One famous such episode is known as the Zenj Rebellion, nearly brought down the Abbasid Empire. It claimed tens of thousands of lives, and the slave trade continued well into the 20th century. Alongside this painful episode of violence, Africans north and south of the Sahara and those from East Africa have also maintained mutually beneficial relations with the Arab world. Diplomacy has been a factor in Sudani-North African relations for several centuries. There are historical documents establishing this fact. During this stay in Cairo in 1324-1325, Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali, met the Mamluk ruler Nasir bin Qaraun. As I said, their encounter was an opportunity for diplomatic exchange between Mali and Egypt in the early Mamluk period. Mansa Musa returned home bringing texts and scholars that stimulated the growth of the Arabic literacy in West Africa. And the Empire of Mali was not the only Sudanese state to engage Egypt. We know that the Sultanate of Borno maintained also close diplomatic relations with Mamluk Egypt. Borno is indeed the first region of West Africa to have developed a tradition of Islamic scholarship and to have cultivated strong ties with Egypt. This is evidenced by an elaborate writing culture as testified by a diplomatic letter dated 1391 and sent by the ruler of Borno, Uthman bin Idris, to the Mamluk ruler Al-Malik al-Zahir al-Barquq, who died in 1399. In itself, it established the presence of scribes with a high degree of mastery of the Arabic language and diplomatic convention in the royal entourage of Borno in the late 14th century. As testified by existing manuscripts in existing Arabic manuscripts, the history of Arabic writings in sub-Saharan Africa spans a period of at least 800 years. Thus, a solid tradition of Islamic scholarship was established in West Africa long before European colonial rule, which dates back only on the 19th century. And scholars trained in that tradition excelled at home and abroad as students and as teachers. And I will give some examples. Maghribi centers of learning, especially Fas and Marrakesh, have attracted Sudani students and scholars for centuries. There are tales of prominent scholars from West Africa whose talents left deep impressions in these cities. One of them is Abu Ishaq Ibrahim al-Kanami, and he is the earliest known West African Sudanese scholar to have written in Arabic. As his name indicates, he originated from Kanem, Borno, where the Islamic presence goes back to the year 46 of the Islamic calendar. Little is known about his early life and education, but we know that he traveled to Marrakesh sometime before 1198. The fact that he was received by the Almohad ruler suggests that he might have been part of a diplomatic mission, particularly since Sudani and Maghribi states have maintained relations from the era of Al-Murabitin. From Marrakesh, he traveled to Andalusia, where he died in 1212 or 1213. though in itself his work has not been preserved, many Arab historians and encyclopedists have quoted lines of his poetry. For example, in his biographical dictionary titled وفاية الأعيان وأنباء أبناء الزمان, the 13th century Arab biographer Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Khallikan report that the black poet Al-Kanami recited the following verses in honor of the Almohad ruler Yaqub al-Mansur. He removed his veils, but my eyes out of awe saw him through a veil. His favor drew me near, but being near out of awe, I found myself distant. أزال حجابه عني وعيني تراه من المهابة في حجابي وقربني تفضلي ولكن بعدت مهابة عند اقترابي. Another Sudanese scholar in the Maghrib is Ahmed Baba al-Timbukti, who died in 1627 and who had lived in Morocco after the fall of the Songhai Empire. After 2 years of house arrest, Ahmed Baba was released and invited to teach in one of the most prestigious mosques of Marrakesh, the Congregational Mosque of the Mawasim. Besides teaching there, he also composed several pieces of work. Some of his students became very influential scholars, and that helped consolidate his reputation. A leading authority in Maliki jurisprudence, Ahmed Baba authored a much-cited biographical dictionary of Maliki jurists. He also intervened authoritatively in many issues, including slavery and also whether the consumption of tobacco is licit. The city of Fez was another reputed center of learning in the medieval Muslim world. Some West African scholars are also known to have flourished there. Among them, Abdullah bin Abdul Jalil al-Barnawi, who is listed among the spiritual mentors of the great 18th century Moroccan saint Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh, who died in 1719. In the Kitab al-Dhahab al-Ibriz bin Kalam Sayyid Abdul Aziz, completed in 1717, which is the main source of the teaching of the Moroccan Sufi, the author Ahmad ibn Mubarak al-Sijil Masi al-Lamati cited Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh as saying the following about his master, who is the black from Borno. He said, al-Dabbagh, I knew that he was one of the friends of and knowers of God, the Sublime. He said his name was Abdullah al-Barnawi, and that he was from Barnawa, and that he had come to Fez to see me. Sayyidi Abdullah al-Barnawi remained with me. He guided me, directed me, and strengthened me. He then returned to his country and left me. The reason for his staying with me was to protect me from darkness entering into me during the illumination I experienced. Al-Azhar in Egypt, as we know, has been a major center of Islamic learning for over 1,000 years and has attracted students from all over the world, including sub-Saharan Africa. In the 18th century, 3 of the 25 residents of Al-Azhar, Al-Arwiqa, hosted students from West Central Africa. The existence of the Riwaq al-Burnawi for students of Borno region, which was established in the 13th century, of the Riwaq al-Dakarina for students from Takrur, Sinar, and Darfur, and other places in the Sudan, and Riwaq Dakarna Saleh for students from the Lake Chad region, testify to the long-standing presence of sub-Saharan scholars in that prestigious institution of high learning, I mean Al-Azhar. As evidenced by those West African residents, many students, pilgrims from West Africa spent time to acquire knowledge in Egypt. They studied with Egyptian ulama from whom they obtained knowledge certification. They also took back home with them the scholarly work of Egyptian scholars. There are chronicles written by Timbuktu scholars in Arabic in the 17th centuries that provide much of our knowledge of West African history. According to these chronicles, and especially the chronicle titled Tarikh al-Sudan by Abdurrahman al-Sa'di, many Timbuktu scholars studied with the Egyptian polymath Abdurrahman al-Suyuti, who died in 1505, and subsequently taught his work, especially his exegesis of the Quran, Tafsir al-Jalalain, during al-Suyuti lifetime in Timbuktu. Abdurrahman al-Jabarti, who died in 1822, the author of Ajaib al-Athar, the marvelous composition of biographies and events, which is a key source on Ottoman Egypt, which covers the history of Egypt from 1688 to 1821, devotes a long necrology to a West African scholar named Muhammad al-Kathinawi, who originated from Kassina, present-day northern Nigeria, left his home in the 1830s to perform pilgrimage to Mecca, and on his way from Mecca, he stayed in Egypt as the guest of Hassan al-Jabarti, the father of Abdurrahman al-Jabarti, in whose home he died, leaving an impressive body of writings. The necrology of al-Jabarti discusses the life story of Muhammad al-Kathinawi, including his studies between Katsina and Borno, where he received his training in Quran, Hadith, Fiqh, etc., and was introduced to other disciplines such as literary and linguistic, historical, mathematical, philosophical, medical, astronomical, exoteric, and occult sciences. Of all his works, the Durrul Manzoom fi Ilm al-Talasim wal-Nujum is the most famous, as it displays knowledge of scientific and cosmological theories prevailing over the centuries in all the Islamic, Christian, and Jewish traditions, as well as their precursors in classical antiquity. Ibrahim al-Kanami of the 13th century, Ahmad Baba al-Timbukti of the 17th century, Muhammad al-Barnawi and Muhammad al-Kathinawi of the 18th century are only a few illustrations of well-known black scholars who illustrate the long historical presence of these scholars of the Bilad Sudan in North Africa, a presence that intensified significantly after African countries becoming independent, when institutions of high learning in the Arab world provided great opportunities for students from sub-Saharan Africa to study there. Now, I will address the relation between East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. In addition to the Sahara, the Red Sea, Indian Ocean region was also not a barrier, but a bridge between East Africa and the Arabian Peninsula before Islam. The Ethiopian empire of Aksum, at its height, extended across most of present-day Eritrea, Ethiopia, Western Yemen, southern Saudi Arabia, and Sudan. We know that many Ethiopians lived in Mecca at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, one of the most prominent being, of course, Bilal al-Habashi, the first muezzin in Islamic history. And we know also that the first hijrah took place in 615, 7 years before the hijrah to Yathrib. It took place to Habasha, where one of the first mosques of Islamic history was built in present-day Eritrea. That was 7 years before the hijrah. So Islam spread in the Horn and Swahili coast, but did not penetrate in the East African hinterland before the 19th century. But coastalist Swahili Muslims maintained close relations with the Arabian Peninsula in the last millennium. An important factor in the spread of Islam in the hinterland of the Swahili coast was the integration of that region in the Omani Busaidi commercial and political empire. From the 19th century, the Busaidi Empire conquered major coastal cities, including Lamu in 1813, Pate in 1824, Mombasa in 1837, and in 1832 or 1830, depending on the sources, Sultan Said, as we know, moved his capital to Zanzibar, an island which has been part of the Omani Empire since the 17th century. Later 19th century Busaidi rule led to the creation of large sugar plantation in the hinterland along the Pangani River, and it contributed also significantly to the expansion of Islam in the Swahili hinterland and also to the development of Islamic scholarship. The relation between the Omani diaspora and the indigenous experienced a difficult period in the transition from Zanzibar to Busaidi rule, in the transition from Busaidi rule to the rule of Tanzania, yet it was revived by the creation of a network of charities and educational institutions by the Omani diaspora. Kimberly Wortman, one of our students, of Harvard students, who is a professor at Wake Forest College in the university has just published a study of Istiqama, an organization created 30 years ago through a joint effort between the Office of the Mufti in the Sultanate of Oman, led by Sheikh Ahmad bin Hamad al-Khalili, who was born in Zanzibar in 1946, and other brethren in Tanzania. Istiqama established in Tanzania a vast network of mosques, schools, radio stations, orphanage, charities located across the country in towns and cities like Zanzibar town, Tanga, Tabora, Kingoma, where Omani settled in large number. And these centers, it must be recalled, grew to prominence through the interactions between African, Asian, and Arabic trading communities. The connections across the Sahara or the Red Sea are now being well documented. But as I said at the beginning of my lecture, not even the Atlantic Ocean was a barrier to the spread of African Islamic culture. While the Atlantic was dominated by Europeans, African Muslims also participated in it. They not just carried over Islamic literacy in the Americas, they expanded it. The Du Bois database located in Atlanta, a major resource for documenting transatlantic slavery, estimates that 12.1 million Africans were deported to the Americas in exactly 36,000 trips. Among the West African slaves deported to America, approximately 20% were Muslim. Some of them were very learned, and these slaves were able to uphold the pillars of Islam, especially in the Protestant colonies, where they were not forced to convert to Christianity until the 18th century. Constant arrival of enslaved Muslims brought very learned African slaves to the Americas, and in the mid-19th century, there were thousands of literate Muslims in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and many freed slaves returned to West Africa to study and return back to the America to continue that scholarly tradition. Popular texts in Africa, such as Imam Busairi's Al-Burda, were being taught in Brazil in the 19th century. And many European travelers noted high literacy rates among West African slaves and noted that they were better educated than the Portuguese. Now the role of pilgrimage in the consolidation of connection. Islamic scholarship has been the most important factor in consolidating the relations between Sudani African Muslims and their co-religionists in the Arab world. The search for knowledge has entailed constant travel, and before the erection of colonial boundaries, scholars traveled unhindered in the large space of the Dar al-Islam, and the Hajj was closely linked to scholarship. As shown by the example of Ibn Battuta, the scholars left their loved ones behind not just to perform the Hajj, but also to acquire knowledge, books, and ijazah to transmit knowledge. Today, a pilgrim can fly from anywhere of the world to the Haramain in just hours. Before the 20th century, they traveled by foot, camel, or horse and stopped in centers of learning along the way to study or visit the maqam of awliya. For scholars from West Africa, it took many years to reach the Haramain. A student would travel from Senegal through Mauritania and then to Morocco, to Fez, and from Morocco, he would follow the North African route to Egypt via Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, stopping in centers of learning along the way. From Egypt, he would go to the Haramain, which was also a center of learning where scholars from the world, the Muslim world, would meet and exchange ideas and scholarly works. When they returned home, they would bring scholarly works from all over the world, and an examination of the writings of Muslim scholars, even of the pre-colonial period, even pre-19th century, revealed that they cite other Muslim scholars from North Africa, Western Asia, South and Southeast Asia, which is evidence that they have for long participated in a global network of intellectual exchange. Now the Sufi orders. It is known that Sufism is a dominant form of spirituality in the Muslim world. In Sudanic Africa, there is a high percentage of Sufi affiliates among the Muslim population. Sufi Turuq have created strong intellectual and spiritual links between their initial centers in the Middle East and North Africa and their adherents in Sudanic Africa. The earliest Sufi order to make inroad in West Africa is the Qadiriyya, whose eponymous founder is Abdul Qadir Jilani, who died in 1166. From North Africa, the Qadiriyya was introduced through the desert to West Africa. The second major order is the Tijaniyya. It was founded by Ahmed Tijani, who originated from Ain Madi, Algeria, but spent the latter part of his life in Morocco, where he died in 1815. His mausoleum, based in Fas, Morocco, just like that of Abdul Qadir Jilani in Baghdad, has become a major center of pilgrimage, attracting scholars from all over the world, but especially Sudanic Africa. The Tariqa Tijaniyya, whose adherents run in the tens of millions, has become one of the major articulations of global Islam. The majority of its adherents are Sudani Africans who established Zawiya and spiritual and educational centers throughout Africa and recently in the African diaspora. But it is not just in number that Sudani Africans made a contribution to the Sufi Turuq. They have also produced a huge devotional literature in praise of or in defense of the Sufi Turuq against their detractors. The devotional poetry produced in the Bilad al-Sudan in Arabic rank among the best poetry. The Babtain Dictionary of Contemporary Arab Poets, whose second edition published in 2005 documented 2,000 poets all over the world, contain entries for all West African countries. And for Senegal, my country alone, there is a list of 60 poets who compose refined poetry, and of course the list is much longer. And now I want to turn to one of them, the Senegalese scholar, Sheikh Ibrahim Niass, who was one of the founding member of the World Muslim League and has served as one time vice president, Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami. He also served as vice president of the World Islamic Congress based in Karachi, Pakistan. He was a member of the Research Academy of Al-Azhar, and he produced works in all fields of Islamic knowledge, including huge devotional poetry, which is taught, memorized, performed, and commented upon by a wide range of scholars, of students, of musicians, and poets from all over Africa, and as far away as Egypt and Indonesia, France, and the United States. Niass is among the most popular and celebrated poets on the African continent, and his collections of Arabic poetry are far better known locally than that of celebrated poets who wrote in European language. Like the famous Persian Jalaluddin Rumi, he wrote for a broader audience beyond his followers. He spoke to the core of the human conditions, invoking themes such as the insomnia of passionate longing. His Arabic poetry is today increasingly pondered by mystics and spiritual lovers from across the Muslim world. In his collection of poetry entitled Sayr al-Qalb, there is a poem entitled Iwan Kisra, written upon his visit in Iraq in 1960. The Iwan, or Ark of Khosroes in Iraq, is the only visible structure remaining of the Sassanid capital, Sejistion, Madain in Arabic, about 35 kilometers south of present Baghdad. It is considered an architectural marvel, possibly constructed during the reign of Anushirwan Khosroes, ca. 540. The ruins of his palace have served as inspiration for many poets, particularly due to Islamic belief that this Iwan cracked upon the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, signaling the emergence of Islam as a new empire and civilization that would replace that of Sassanid. As the translator noted, the poem referenced many of the miraculous legends surrounding the Prophet's birth and life. It's a celebration of the coming of the spiritual reality of the Prophet into the world, eclipsing all other temporal powers and representing the miraculous but inevitable triumph of truth, justice, and spiritual authority over seemingly invincible temporal authority. I will read it first in English, and then we will listen to the poem in Arabic chanted by Nyan. Was it Khosroes Iwan that was crushed, heralding the emergence of my prophet and Khosroes evanescence? O Khosroes Anushirwan, when Muhammad came with his greatest sign? Was it your castle that he saw? O Khosroes Anushirwan, when Muhammad came, did the rivers run dry or did they gush forth? O Khosroes Anushirwan, when Muhammad came, did not the Magi come to you extolling him? O Khosroes Anushirwan, when Muhammad came, reciting, reminding, warning, and giving glad tidings? Had not the idols prostrated to God, speaking of his coming, and the soothsayers had told of what was hidden? Greeting of peace to the light of God that overshadowed by his lights the lights of Khosroes and Caesar. Greeting of peace to he who brought, while he was in Mecca, a light in which Khosroes Iwan was cracked. Greeting of peace to being sacred and its symbol, for God alone is what is more exalted and precious and dazzling. Greeting of peace to he who came, while existence, all of it was darkness, and from his light it was illuminated. Greetings of peace to him from a lovelorn servant in Baghdad, exhausted from having spent the night in sleepless contemplation. So he who raised this castle while he was a baby in Mecca will not leave behind any appearance of that infidelity. So he who raised his castle while he was in Mecca will raise the castle of infidelity wherever it is remembered. Upon him be the blessing of God, and then his peace too, for I see the lot of Muslims is abundant fortune. From him be the blessing of God, and then his peace too, and the share of the enemies of religion is a scourge of destruction. Now the second poem that I will share is from the same Diwan Sayr al-Qalb, and it was inspired by a trip to Saudi Arabia when Sheikh Nias, traveling with his son Abdullah Ibrahim, arrived late in Medina, where the mausoleum of the Prophet was open just for the two of them to perform the ziyarah. And after Medina, they went to Mecca to perform the Umrah. And the first part of the poem mentioned various sites of historic Medina, Aqiq, Uhud, Khandaq, Sal', Haris, Arwa, and many and names of animals owned by the Prophet, such as the male horse Tirf or the camel Qaswa, and other areas in Saudi Arabia, such as Riyadh and Najd. And the second part of the poem deals with his stay in Mecca and performance of the ritual of Umrah. It names different sites of the Haram, such as Safa, Marwa, Hatim, Maqam Ibrahim, Hijr, Zamzam, Mizab al-Rahma, etc. The title is Habani, Khairun Nasi Birran Wala Gharwa. The best of humankind has given me from his virtue no wonder. Is he not the best of all creature, unlike anyone else? I came to him late in the night with my son, only the two of us kneeling before his door as I had hoped. I addressed my beloved, and because of his nearness, I felt as if my dream of meeting the best of all beings had come true. Drowning in the ocean of his love, I said, greeting to the one who rode a tirf wal qaswa. I imagined that I had touched Muhammad and that he hugged me openly. What a lovely repose. A blessing be upon the best of creations, the chosen of all creatures, the one who dispelled injustice and calamity. Greetings and peace from a lovelorn servant from the farthest country in the west, which is Senegal, seeking refuge with the chosen one. May Allah honor and grant you peace. My life is free from sin and futility. May Allah honor you and grant you peace. My love will always be for the trustworthy one without distraction. May Allah honor and grant you peace. May you save my progeny from misguidance and temptations. As I was leaving him, my cheer fell abundantly. At a time when a young man's tear would be of no benefit, I said farewell to him and took Allah as a witness in his presence that in truth I refuse idolatry and vile passions. I bear witness that there is no Lord but Allah, and Taha is my chosen guide and my strongest support. After I left him, I could enjoy no other place, nor could I enjoy Najd, nor could I enjoy Arwa. All the beauty and the greenery of Riyadh and its climate and its pleasant climate, however unparalleled it may be, will it make me forget Aqiq and Khandaq, the mount of Uhud and Salah, the well of Aris and the drink it gave. What a pleasant sojourn I had after in Mecca, alone in Hatim and the station of Abraham we had to ourselves. How sweet was it, my Lord, to humbly prostrate before your door, imploring the majestic Lord to forgive us. I kissed the right hand of the truth, may he be exalted, following in the footsteps of the chosen one, the Hashemite, to Zamzam, to the Mizab al-Rahmah, to Hijr and to Safa. These were moments of internal and external purifications. I kept invoking Allah, nothing exists except him. In front of me, behind me, like one who has achieved annihilation, I implored him for protection, forgiveness, and accepted repentance, guidance, success, and safety from all ills, a vision, as well as his acceptance, victory, and contentment. A vision of him in the midst of the garden as I long for. May he who brought back Taha to Mecca bring Ibrahim back to the chosen one, his refuge. May Allah honor and grant peace to Ahmad, the chosen one, an honor by which my dwelling is beautified. May Allah honor and grant peace to his noble family and blessed companion, a prayer by which benefit floods forth without measure. Now I will play the... Now, to conclude, I will argue that Arabic as a linguistic vehicle of knowledge transmission was as important in the history of the Muslim people in general as Latin was in Europe. We know that non-Arabs wrote much of what has been written in Arabic in the formative period of Islamic civilization from the 8th to the 15th century. To just cite a few examples, Sibawayh, the author of the reference work in Arabic grammar, was the Persian, so was Imam Ghazali, arguably the most influential Muslim theologian after the Prophet. This should come as no surprise because non-Arab Muslims represent 80% of the global Muslim population. Among the Muslim people of Sudanic Africa, Arabic has been a major medium of instruction throughout the second millennium. Recent research has documented that scholars from Sudanic Africa have contributed to all fields of Islamic knowledge. The Al-Furqan Islamic Heritage Foundation, which was established by former Saudi Petroleum Minister Ahmed Zaki Yamani, sponsored the cataloging of dozens of collections of thousands of manuscripts in Sudanic Africa at the turn of the 20th century, and this cataloging has laid the foundation for the production of a comprehensive encyclopedia of Arabic writing in Sudanic Africa, the discussion of which is beyond the scope of this lecture. But it lists biographies of thousands of scholars and their work. Therefore, Sudanic Africa has been integrated to the Dar al-Islam for centuries, long before colonialism. As I have argued, the pilgrimage tradition, Hajj and Ziyarah combined, played an important role in the development of Islamic scholarship and also in maintaining close ties between scholars of Sudanic Africa and the Arab world, because candidates for the Hajj transited in centers of learning and maqam of Sufi saints along the way to acquire knowledge, while now the Hajj has been divorced to scholarship because people fly directly from their country to the Holy Land, whereas before they would stay in centers of learning along the way in order to learn, just as the case of Ibn Battuta shows. So because a large number of Sudanese scholars are also affiliated with the Sufi Turuq, the Qadiriyya, the Tijaniyya, and others, they have cultivated poetry as an expression of Islamic spirituality. And just like Ibrahim Yasu's poems I have shared, many have composed poetry in praise of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in praise of other saints and friends, etc. They have also maintained close ties with learning and spiritual centers in the Arab world for centuries until now. Thank you very much for your attention.
شكرا للبروفيسور عثمان كان على محاضرته الشيقة. نفتح الآن المجال للملاحظات والأسئلة والمداخلات.
Malbousaidi from Sultan Qaboos Institute for teaching Arabic to non-native speakers. Well, I had a question, but you answered it about Arabic as a medium of instruction. But I think at the end you mentioned that. So, based on what you have mentioned and based on the current situation in Africa in general, not specific area, how do you see Arabic in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think one comment that I want to make is that almost 2/3 of the Arabs live in Africa, and the Arabic language is, either maternal language or a language of instruction or of worship for half of the population of the continent of Africa, which is, 500 million. If you include Muslims, then, half of the African continent use Arabic either language of instruction or language of worship. So I think that itself answers your question. It has been here for a while, and I think that it's likely to continue, and many states, are now, especially in part of Muslim Africa, recognizing the need to do more in order to support African language. And, in order to support, to promote Arabic language. So I think that it has a very bright future.
أود أن أدعو الآن معالي محمد بن الزبير لتكريم بروفيسور كان، فليتفضل مشكورا. كما نتوجه بالشكر الجزيل للشركتين الداعمتين للمهرجان، الشركة الوطنية للتمويل وشركة آر للبترول. وأدعو الآن الفاضل طارق الفارسي الرئيس التنفيذي للشركة الوطنية للتمويل، والدكتور عمر الجعيدي مدير عام آر للبترول للتكريم. في الختام ندعوكم جميعا للالتحاق بالبروفيسور كان في الطابق الأرضي لبيت النهضة لتكملة الحوار في جو ودي والاستمتاع بهذه الأمسية. شكرا لكم.